Hello and welcome to Your Money, Your Life, Black Enterprise financial series focused on financial wellness. I'm your host, Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior Vice President and Executive Editor at Black Enterprise. Listen, guys, you guys know me. I'm all about trying to live long and strong and financing my life, maybe for the next 3 decades, maybe 4 if I'm fortunate, as someone who's in my 60s. But one of the realities of that is that what I thought about retirement planning when I was early in my career, early in my adult life, those assumptions no longer apply. So today we're going to talk about rethinking retirement, the new realities of retirement for everyone, but particularly if you're an earlier career professional or early career entrepreneur who now has to think about how are you going to finance your life and your lifestyle beyond the traditional age of 65. With me to have this important conversation is one of my favorite financial educators on Instagram in particular. I've become a big fan of his over the last year, and that is Kevin L. Matthews II, founder of Building Bread. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So listen, man, like I said, this is something I've been wrestling with, or at least starting to think about since I was in my mid-40s, when I started thinking about what is the rest of my life going to look like? What's going to be the post-50th birthday life going to look like? And I started realizing, despite what I had saved up for my 401k and despite, what I had in my investment accounts, if I did the math, I was going to run out of money. And let's talk about the broader goal of under the category of knowing your wealth, that I wasn't trying to just leave nothing to my kids, that I was trying to be able to finance my own life and then also obviously leave some type of legacy assets to my children. And I had to restart really rethinking my career and what I want to accomplish, and what my earning power could be. And that brings me to, this discussion that we're having today, which is, now it's kind of commonly recognized, particularly in the financial services industry, that what retirement planning was like for someone born in the the 60s and the 70s and even the 80s it's a lot different than someone who is born in the late 80s, 90s and going forward, because of these new realities. First of all, I want you to talk a little bit about Building Bread, what you do with Building Bread. I know I said it before, I'm a big fan of it, but in terms of this whole idea of understanding and being educated about the economy and the markets and what's going around you do some very interesting, I would say even provocative sometimes, in terms of challenging people's conventional wisdom about what they see and hear about their financial education.
Yeah, so what I do at Building Bread since 2010 is primarily make investing simple, but that's really expanded recently on making everything around money very simple. So whether it's the international economy, whether it's retirement, again, investing, budgeting, anything that has to do with money, building wealth, generational wealth, retirement planning, I want to make sure that you can understand it, that it's simple, and that you can apply that knowledge. If it's tax planning, right, I want to make sure that you can really understand some of the misconceptions that you may see online, some of the old beliefs that used to work that don't work anymore in this particular environment, and break it down and say, hey, this may not work anymore. It may have worked for your parents, may have worked for your grandparents. How does this actually work today, and make sure that it is simple and applicable to who you are today? And my job is to sit down and explain it and see what actually works for this generation and for the world that we are in today.
I'm oversee for Black Enterprise a platform called Health is Wealth, which is kind of our play in the health equity platform in terms of recognizing health as an actual financial asset, as an actual wealth asset. And it comes naturally to me because, as you probably know by now, I'm really big into health and fitness. I'm a natural bodybuilder is my kind of amateur sport, but I always kind of correlate investing from a health standpoint along with investing for my financial future. I look at those things in the same way, and I bring that to light because one of the new thoughts about health and longevity is this idea that there's such thing as health span and there's lifespan. Lifespan is what we talk about, how long we're going to live. Health span is how we're living. And I equate that to even my now approach to what I used to call retirement planning, and it still includes retirement planning, but now I'm thinking longevity planning, and
Mm-hmm.
there's even a new emerging area of finance called longevity finance that's saying, no, you got to think about not just when you start working, why you start working, how you start working, but how do you finance longevity, beyond the traditional retire at 60 or 60 to 65. Life expectancy was a lot shorter, back when
Mm-hmm.
Social Security and those things were created. And you figure, especially if you're black, if you can get to 60, 65 and, leave something for your kids, you thought you maybe had a 10-year runway left, you were
Mm-hmm.
good. But now often, while the average may still be, in the early 70s, especially for black men, but that's just an average. Many
Mm-hmm.
black people are living a lot longer. Black women in particular are living a lot longer. And again, the question becomes, how do you think about retirement planning or longevity planning in a way that may have been different? And as you're talking about understanding, what your options are, for financing that.
Yeah, so there are a lot of ways that financial planners and those in the financial community look at this. Some call it longevity risk, where you outlive your money. Because,
Mm,
like you said, it used to be, you end work at 65 and then, 75, 80, that's where we stop the whole planning process, right? Maybe at 90. And there are people living beyond that point, and there aren't any plans past there. There used to not be that. Now, people are saying, okay, well, we need to kind of extend that plan out. And what are the options to that? So the issue is, let's say about 40 years or so ago, it used to be, well, we had pension plans. Those were a lot more accessible to more people, where this wasn't really a thing. You could go work at a bunch of places and they would just pay you for the rest of your life.
you get that
And
good job at the post office, you get the good
yeah,
job at the
yeah,
auto
yep,
manufacturer, and as long as you
yeah.
kept your nose clean,
Yep.
kept it going.
And yeah, you got to watch at the end of the day, and you were good to go, right? And
Exactly.
that's a part of kind of what's different between some of our parents' generation versus what makes things so complex for my generation and others today. Because when you think about it, not only was retirement planning a lot easier back then, you just worked for X amount of years, they paid you, housing was cheaper, right? So that didn't take up as much of their budget. College was cheaper, so that didn't take up as much as your budget. But now you have housing taking up more, right? Retirement planning, now you have to pay for a lot more of it. So you have a lot less to work with and higher expenses just to live. So it makes things a lot more difficult. But to answer that question, it's now, how do we work around it? So the question, the answer is, how much more do you have to put away for retirement? So the general rule of thumb is anywhere between 12 to 15%. Can you do more? Is a question there. Can you, or do you even desire to work longer if you choose to? Some people want to. And one way around this that some people are finding is they'll move into a second type of career, something that may be a little less strenuous. For example, someone may work in business, right? And they'll do something that, let's say, a law firm or something like that. They're high in their career, maybe they're a CEO or something like that. And I'll say, hey, look, I've done this for a while. I'm going to go and teach. I'll be, a small time professor on the side. And that smaller income plus my retirement is going to last me for the rest of my life, because I'm making a little bit that's going to supplement my retirement income. And I'm only working 2 or 3 days a week or something like that. There are others who'll say, hey, look, I'm finally going to open that taco truck or something like that, just because they don't need to make a ton of money, because they've already saved, because they've already invested. So there are some hybrid ways that people are looking into it to see how they can extend their retirement and perhaps take on that purposeful project that they were always looking to do, but haven't been able to do it for the majority of their life.
It's funny you mentioned that for a couple of reasons. One, that's exactly the transition I started in my mid 40s. Is what did I
Mm-hmm.
want my life to look like? And, everybody knows I
Yeah.
work at Black Enterprise. I've been at Black Enterprise now. I'm at 38th year. I don't have any plans to leave. Hopefully, they have no plans to let me go. But I began in my mid 40s to carve out what are the things, one, that I want to do that because of the nature of my career I couldn't do earlier. Being editor in chief of Black Enterprise for 13 years, being chief content officer that was the kind of job, like you said, that's 60 hours a week and you're not doing much else besides that. But I was at the stage, let me ease into other roles that would give me more time flexibility. Um, and then to start thinking about what are the skills, what are the talents, what are the passions that I have that weren't applicable in my career before. But the other thing that's really relevant to what you just said, I just read this book called Strength to Strength that I highly recommend. I think the author's name is Arthur C. Brooks, I believe, Arthur C. Brooks. And the whole point of the book is that there's a mindset and a skill set and a kind of intelligence that you use in the first half of your working life, which is about advancement and putting in the hours and climbing up the ladder and doing those things. And then if you do it right, there's a natural transition as the way you think changes even because you get older. I mean, physiologically, that leans more toward teaching, mentorship, taking the accumulated knowledge. And now it's not about how many hours you put in and how much you produce, if you will, but more about how you enhance the value of organizations. And that dovetails perfectly with the law partner who was like, okay, 25 years, I've been a law partner, great. Now I'm just going to teach law at my alma mater, mentor. And maybe I'm not making as much money, but with my retirement income, I'll be good. And so it does talk about, it underscores the point of this show. Like it's not about the nuts and bolts of do you invest in this, invest in that. It's about financial wellness, financial mindset, to reimagine your life, and then go to say what makes sense from you from a financial education and financial wellness terms. Because again, to your point, you could say our parents and their parents had less financial education, but you could also say they didn't need it as much as we do. In other words, more of the decision making around, where do we put our 401k money and how do you allocate that? And if you're going to invest, more of it is in our hands. So you need people like you and building bread in a way that our parents didn't really need that kind of resource, even if it was available.
Yeah, I mean, things were just less complex. I mean, it's kind of like cars, right? Like cars back then, or I mean, even in the '90s, right? Like cars were cars. Like I could change my oil. I could learn to change my oil. Electric cars now? What? You need a degree in computer science if you're trying to update the software or whatever it is now, right? Like that's just not a thing. Like I could take a car to my uncle to get it fixed. No, you're not doing that anymore unless they went to Stanford or
even
something
if it's
crazy.
not an electric car. I mean, my most recent car, which was time for me to get rid of it, I had it for like 12 years, and it served me well. But the reason I ended up getting rid of it wasn't the stuff you think about, the engine, the fan belt. It was because the keyless remote stopped working. And it's like, that's not, you think, I'm just going to go.
Yeah.
No, that's a like $1,600.
Yeah, you're right.
Thing. And it was like, this car is too, but you're right. The complexities back in the day,
just way
you
too
had
complex,
an uncle or your dad or even your mom could tell you how to do the basics, change the oil, change the tire, switch out the spark plugs. Those days are over. And you're right. In terms of managing finances, same thing. It's a lot more complex. It's a lot more in your own hands, which is great. But financial education is just a necessity.
Yeah, and I want to go back to your health point earlier. When it comes to like having that second part of your career, that also can help with your health as well. Because what we do see with a lot of retirees, they just go and retire and just kind of sit at home and just kind of stay there. And that's not always the most healthy thing to do, because what you don't want to do is just you sit at home and you kind of lose that social interaction, and you actually need that for your health. Either you can go out and travel, right, which is what a lot of people should do and get out into the world, but also getting out there if you are like a college professor or something like that, but like seeing people, building those social bonds, that is good for your health. So you do want to get out there, either if it's for work or joining a social group or gaining a new hobby or whatever it is. So you do still want to get out there and get active. You don't want to just, hey, I'm retired, and just like sit there. So that health piece is a good part of it. So get it however you want to, but that is a good important piece because you do want to continue to live and you want to continue to spend that money. You have earned it, you have worked for it, it has been building for a very long time, and you deserve to spend it, right, for as long as you can.
You hit at the heart of what we mean when we say financial wellness. That's not just like
Mm-hmm.
a cute term. There's a direct correlation, um, particularly between social isolation and health.
Yeah.
Loneliness is now considered a public health issue
Yes,
among many
absolutely.
populations, including older populations who are, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, before all of your social activity was, I went to work. Like, I have a Black enterprise family that I've had for nearly 4 decades, and so you're right. It's not just, do I have enough money to live, which again, that's traditional retirement planning. This idea of longevity planning, you said longevity risk, is about how does that fit in with everything else that I need to have a high quality of life beyond I can pay my mortgage and I can buy food. And you're right. So it really goes all together. The financial and the wellness goes all together.
Mm-hmm.
It's, talk to me about what you are thinking as a younger professional, and what you think your peers and younger. Again, I was from that generation that no matter how much we were told, you need to think about your retirement. We traditionally was like, we get to, like I did, my mid 40s, and I'm like, oh wait, that's supposed to be like 20 years away. And I work at a financial company, and I still was like, yeah, 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 but I'm gonna get to it. So it was always important to begin with the end in mind, as the saying
Mm-hmm.
goes. But now I believe, for if you're millennial or younger, that's even more important. That even as you're coming out of high school or coming out of college, you need to be thinking about this. So what are some maybe top three pieces of advice from a financial education, financial wellness standpoint, that around retirement and how you think about it for younger generations of professionals, and who are early stage, but they need to start thinking about it now.
Yeah, I would say the younger you are, the better off this is going to be for you, and the cheaper it is going to be for you. I think that's something that I don't think enough people really think about. I think there are some times where you look at articles and you'll look and say, who has $1,000 a month to invest? Who has $1,500 a month to invest? Well, that's because they started at 35, 40. Like, yeah, it gets, the longer you wait, the more expensive it becomes to try and hit whatever that golden number is going to be. Well, I started investing for my kids at age 0. So all they need is $100, $75 a month. Because again, if you're starting at 0, by the time they are 30, right, they've been investing for 30 years. So they already have a head start. So the younger you are, especially if you're in high school, especially if you just started college, is going to be very inexpensive for you to start the ball rolling. I think one of the quotes I love saying is 10 years from now, you're going to wish you started 10 years ago. And I think that is also extremely important. And when you are looking at starting, the key thing is sit down, figure out what that plan is going to be, start, and then put it on autopilot. If your concern is, hey, I don't have a ton of money today, or I feel like, look, I'm paying student loans, I've got daycare, I'm trying to save for a house, I've got all this stuff. We've all been there. We have all been there because all of us have competing needs and things out there. We all do. Okay. Everybody's got some, this is not the only expense we have, right?
Right.
The thing is, once you start, it is much easier to say, look, at least I have X amount of dollars, 5% of my income. Again, the goal, right, for most people is to get anywhere between 12 to 15%. But if I'm starting with at least 5, if I'm starting with 1, it's easier to go from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, right? And slowly inch things up as you move up. When I first started investing, my first job was as a teacher. I looked to my left, I looked to my right, I looked everywhere for every piece of change I could get. And all I could invest was $100 on a teacher's salary. It wasn't much. It was not much, but it was something. And then as I moved up in my career, I just inched that up, right? And said, okay, look, I've paid this bill off. I don't have this credit card anymore. I don't have this bill. Now let's start to increase this budget and invest more. And that's how things started to build up. However, I wasn't starting from zero once I was 25, once I was 30.
Mm,
I had something to build from. And the last thing I'll say too, when it comes to how much you're investing and the fact that you are starting, is invest. We talk about percentages, right? When it comes to investing, we talk about compounding interest. Anything over zero does compound.
yes.
That is the point,
Yes.
right? So I don't care if you can only invest $50 a month. Anything greater than zero, right, does compound. So that is still going to be beneficial over time. Not overnight, but over time. So that is going to be the most important thing. Start early, have it automated so you don't have to sit there and look at it every single day, and just make sure that you are slowly inching your way up. And know for a fact that we all have competing needs, especially if you are early in your career. It is going to be tough. But once you start to increase your salary, once you start to get a hang of life and things that are happening, you do start to figure things out. You do start to increase your salary, and things do start to get a bit easier.
One of the things I love about my work and getting to talk to people like you is no matter how much I know, and I've learned a lot. Obviously, I've been talking to people like you for now, like I said, 40 years. I've been a financial journalist for 40 years. But I have this conversation, and somebody like you, in this case, you are saying something that I was like, oh, and this is what it is. I'm thinking, oh, we got to get people to think early and start early, coming out of high school or coming out of college. No, you're right. It's like retirement planning or longevity planning should start at birth. That if you can get your kids on a roll as they go into adulthood and they're not starting from scratch. And of course, we talk a lot, you and I have talked, even with our Wealth Building Dads conversation we had recently, about even not only just helping them to get started from birth by building, this called retirement fund, for lack of a better word, even though we don't think about that when we think of kids, but also talking to them about here's what this is, so that by the time they get to high school or college, they're like, no, I know that when I get my job, I'm going to put $50 here, and this is what it's for. And I'm already thinking about what I want when I'm 50, 60, 70, if I choose to stop working or I have to stop working. I just rather do something else. And again, those are things that, like you said, the earlier we start, but this idea of the legacy we leave to our kids is about making retirement planning not a late stage conversation, but a lifetime conversation. It's a life planning conversation. So
Yeah.
that's not something I really I ever thought about. That I'm thinking about, what do you think about for yourself? And you're like, no, I'm starting them off, even from birth, so that they're not
Yeah.
starting with zero, even as they enter into adulthood and they start, getting a chance to save in a 401k or IRA or whatever.
Yeah, and it's not just the financial piece, but it's also the compounding of experience. So
Oh,
like my son who is 6 and my daughter who'll be 4 here in just a few weeks, they both now have more money at ages 6 and almost 4 than I had in high school. And
yes.
I was working my tail off in high school and saving. And I was like, hey, I got 4 digits in my account in high school.
Right,
I thought I was balling.
right.
No, these kids have already surpassed me because they are investing. But I would argue, perhaps more importantly, by the time they reach high school, they're going to learn. They're going to make some investment mistakes at some point in time. But I would rather them learn and make those mistakes at 16, 17,
Right,
18
right.
than make those mistakes at like 25, 30, 45, where they really hurt and they really matter.
Oh yeah,
And I
oh
think
yeah.
that is important too, because we've all made mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes. But, as someone who's got a house and kids and parents, like,
Yes.
I don't want to make no mistakes at this phase, right? It's
Right,
gonna hurt.
right,
So
right.
it's when you start early, you can afford to make those mistakes and then not really have any residual impacts. It's not gonna hurt a bunch of people. It's like, hey, I made that mistake. I can get up and keep moving. So I think that's important too. The earlier you start, you can make the mistake, get up and keep moving. So again, that is another benefit of starting as soon as you can. There's just so many benefits of doing that.
Yeah, and I want to again underscore what's not a new idea, but it becomes a more important, even more valuable idea the younger you are. it takes less money if you start saving for retirement
Mm-hmm.
and planning your
Yep.
retirement when you're younger.
Right.
You can absorb the risk of not only your own mistakes, but the ups and downs of the economy, the things that impact the values of your investment and all that stuff. But also the thing that again, it's not a new idea, but it's so important to understand. And you said it. I'm going to say it again. Zero can't compound. Like there's no compound on zero, but one can compound. And so the biggest reason why I failed, and I'm a perfect example of if I had done it 10 years ago, I'd have been happier now or 20 years or whatever. Um, that any amount of money put toward this retirement goal is better than zero. And no matter how little you're making, and I always tell people, if I just had my club money back, my drink money back, just if it was $20 a week. And so the idea that we have tools and that our parents and grandparents didn't have, they for the most part they didn't have a 401k. They couldn't open up an IRA. They had what they had. We have things that we could start out with our kids and certainly with ourselves. And again, even if you put in $40 a month, here's the other thing. Once that exists, I tell people, once you get started, same thing with the fitness thing. Once you get used to doing, 20 push-ups a day, then you start thinking, oh, I can do 30. Oh, wait, I can walk around the block every day. Oh, I'm seeing results. This is looking good. I'm going to go to it starts out with the small things. And the next thing you know, somebody's bragging about, yeah, my portfolio is this, but you may have only started out with, I was just putting $5 in this, $20 or $40 a month in this IRA, and so it's like it's just getting started as early as possible is so key to all wealth building, but certainly in terms of retirement saving and retirement planning. What as we kind of wrap up this conversation, what are the things that again I follow Building Bread, and you really educate me and so many others about, like you said, things that may either be complex or people have outdated thoughts about. What are the kind of things about retirement planning, and it's important that you want your Building Bread audience to know, which means my Your Money Your Life audience should know, specifically about thinking about retirement and their feelings about retirement planning, regardless of your age.
Yeah, I would say understanding the risk. I mean, because we've been using the word retirement, right? But it's a proxy for the stock market, right?
Right,
We talk about retirement. You're For the most part, you are investing in some way through a 401k, which means you are exposing your money to the stock market. And we're talking the vast majority of people. And especially for people like us, there is a large swath of people or a large group of people who are hesitant to invest in the stock market for a lot of historical reasons, a lot of reasons we saw, right? We saw 2008,
right,
we saw 2020. We saw I can go back, right?
right.
We've seen a lot of
Trust
things
me,
in the
I can
stock
go back.
market. Yeah, yeah. So we have seen some things. And I think we need to realize that yes, there are risks. There are absolutely risks in the stock market. There, it ain't nothing that's risk free.
Right,
Okay.
right,
But I think the most important thing is to zoom back, take a step back and see what the results have been. And there are ways to see, hey, if I invested X amount of money and left it alone, what would the results be? And I think we need to do that a lot more often and see what those results are. And I think too, we need to be a little more hands off when it comes to the stock market. Like consider, like there are so many studies that show what investors would have done if they never touched their retirement account for X amount of years. And then you see some studies where it's like, hey, they took their retirement out for 10 days of the year and you watch the returns drop just for 10
right,
days. And then they took their retirement out for 30 days and like watch the returns cut in half. You're like, wait a minute. I thought I was saving myself from something, right? So I think that is extremely important when you start to look at it. And I think it's, you see what happens. Like for example, in 2020, we were all there, right? We saw the stock market drop. Everyone was afraid. There were a lot of people. I saw y'all comments on Facebook. I saw y'all comments on Instagram. They still there. But there were so many people afraid and withdrawing their money from the 401ks and all kinds of stuff. I want you to go back on any website that you choose. I want you to see what the returns were from the year 2020. The stock market was up. The stock market was actually positive by the end of the year 2020. And you're sitting here thinking like, that did actually, did that happen? And you're like, if you took your money out, you missed those returns.
Yes.
You cannot go back in time and get that. And at that time, you did not know that the stock market was going to be up. I did not know that the stock market was going to be up either, but I left myself alone.
Right.
I didn't touch it. You can go back. I got receipts too, right? You can go back and I said I wasn't going to touch it then either. And I left it alone, right? But that is the thing. And I think we do need to just sit back. And sometimes I know when the waters get rough and you can do all the metaphors there, but I think we need to realize like, hey, let things play out and take a long-term view, in that, you know, research has shown that tends to be the right move, and to take a long-term view just tends to be the right move for the vast majority of people, and that is usually the right steps to take. And I realize for a lot of people that tends to be scary. I also would argue that, you know, we are moving in that direction. Since 2020, there have been a lot of people who look like us who have jumped into the stock market, and I would argue that is a good thing. I want to say in 2023, we were among the top racial groups of first-time investors, which I absolutely adore, because I think we needed to get there, right? And there have been a lot of apps and a lot of resources and a lot of platforms that have introduced us more to the stock market, which again I'm excited for, because I do believe like it's not the only asset class, but it is one of the most important.
Yeah, you said everything that I've seen. Again, I'm obviously much older than you are. First of all, I'm someone that, despite being scared like everybody else off, even when these things happen, I didn't pull money out of my, when things went up and down. And I've had other investment accounts over the years, and I didn't. And it is true. And I've lived through way more, quote unquote, setbacks in the stock market. And no matter how you slice it, you come out ahead over time, which speaks to two things that you and I have talked about before. One, the importance of delayed gratification, and not think it's, you're not putting this retirement planning money away because it needs to be there 2 years from now. Again, especially if you're younger, the whole point is you may have decades to ride out any ups and downs in the market. So those ups and downs are actually inconsequential over time. They just seem great on that day, but over time they're not that great. So there's the importance of delayed gratification. But then there's the basic principle of all wealth building, and it's absolutely applies to saving and investing for long-term goals like retirement. Wealth is built over time. And if you lean into that as a younger person in a way that didn't come naturally to me, I was like, but if you lean into that as a younger person and you're like you said, you have other competing needs that are way more immediate. But if you start out, like you said, with just 5%, and you're like, I'm going to live on 95% of my income, but this 5% I know is going to be waiting for me at the other end, and it's going to ride out maybe decades of up and down in the marketplace. But when all is said and done, compounding, all things being equal, is going to make me come out ahead. And those two ideas are so important. And the last thing I'll say is you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the most encouraging things about being a Black enterprise and is this now realizing that we now have two generations, pretty much Generation X and Generation Y, that are leaning into this idea that I should be investing in a way that, certainly baby boomers and older had to be convinced, like you say, overcoming distrust issues, which is why even being able to have a show like Your Money, Your Life and have a platform like Building Bread is not only important, but it's encouraging to see that, no, you don't have to talk the average person under the age of 40 into the idea that they should be investing. Now it's making sure they have the knowledge and the information to be able to do so confidently and smartly and in a way that does produce wealth building outcomes. And so that's why on that note, Kevin, I just want to thank you I really believe and enjoy. Because the other thing, it's fun to follow your accounts, but it's such. I so strongly recommend to my audience that you should follow Building Bread. In fact, while we're at it, please let the audience know where they can find you, your content, so they can continue to learn from you.
Yeah, you can follow me on all things social media at Building Bread and at buildingbread.com. You can find me on YouTube at Building Bread, where I drop 3 videos per week. You can find me on Instagram, Threads, and everywhere in between at Building Bread.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate you. Thank you for being my guest on Your Money, Your Life.
Thank you for having me.
Yep, and another great edition of Your Money, Your Life. This episode of Your Money, Your Life is brought to you by our friends at Prudential. And I am Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior Vice President, Executive Editor at Black Enterprise. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.